Welcome back to Tracy Take Tuesday. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are doing Ryan's ninth mock draft so far of the 2025 offseason. This is a fun one, too, because free agency just started today as of this recording. So it's going to be fun to see what potential changes might happen to the draft. Before we get into it, be sure to subscribe to the Tracy Take and tackle that bell to get notified when new videos come out. Ryan, let's pull up PFF here and take it away. What changes have there been to
Yeah.
your mock drafts?
So, honestly, there haven't been too many changes just in terms of like player rankings. Well, actually, I take that back. There have been a couple, but like I do feel like the team needs have definitely changed as teams have kind of filled out their rosters. Especially, there's been so much movement on this first day of free agency, and so I feel like just kind of getting things started. One of the teams that had a little bit of, I don't want to say a lack of movement, but a lack of movement at a key position is going to be the Tennessee Titans. They did not go out and get Sam Darnold like I had kind of thought they would. They had the cap space there, but they got Dan Moore. They continue to invest in that offensive line. And I do feel like that is a decent situation for a young quarterback to come into. And so I'm going to go with Cam Ward here coming off the board. I just feel like looking at what Cam Ward brings to the table and his ceiling, I think it is worth passing on Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter here to go and potentially um, get a quarterback that has franchise quarterback potential. It's a big swing, but you have a new front office in there. They're definitely out on Will Levis. And I just think Mac Jones or any of the other options that they're considering are just kind of band-aid options to maybe get through the season. So I think you take the swing here on Cam Ward if you're the Titans. Next up here for the Cleveland Browns, I do think even though they well, one, they also just traded for Kenny Pickett, but I think they're out on the quarterback market here, especially with a couple of the two top draft picks on the board. And so I feel like Abdul Carter is just going to be an elite pairing with Myles Garrett. That's just going to be such a disruptive duo. That defensive line, they lost Darius Smith in the trade to the Lions, so they need a second edge rusher there as well. So I feel like you get Abdul Carter here, and you just have an absolutely menacing front four there. And I do expect them to. They need to get a defensive tackle, so they will probably invest in defensive line again, pretty high up in this draft, and they have a ton of picks as well. So, also that's not foreshadowing in the slightest, but uh, the here with the New York Giants, Travis Hunter is right there. I know that I believe they signed Paulson Adebo. They
Mhm.
need another corner. I also think too, if you're really trying to save your job, like Joe Shane and Brian Dable are, I feel like going out and getting a Shadur Sanders, a developmental quarterback, to come in and sit behind whatever free agent that they decide to get, whether they trade for Kirk Cousins, whether they sign Aaron Rodgers, or maybe go get Russell Wilson. I feel like the best way forward for them to winning is by taking Travis Hunter here. He's just an elite athlete. He brings such a level of dynamism to your football team on both sides of the ball with his two-way ability. I just feel like that's so hard to pass up here at 3. So Travis Hunter going to the New York Giants. This is where the draft I think really gets interesting because before today, I really was thinking that the Patriots would maybe pass on. They would invest big in Cam Robinson in free agency, and they still might. He's still available at the recording of this video, and invest in that like left tackle spot. But instead, they went out. They got Morgan Moses at right tackle. You have Caden Wallace there, and reports have come out of the building that they want to solidify him long term at right tackle. And then from there, so I was thinking Armand Membu that was the big riser out of the combine. I think he would be a really good fit there. I don't see that nearly as much now. The other one would be Shamar Stewart, but they just signed Harold Landry, and then they went out and got Milton Williams, and so I feel like defensive line here might be a little redundant. So I'm actually just going to go kind of chalk and take Tet McMillan. That big outside wide receiver is something that they've needed. I think you look at Jalen Polk; his best season came with Rome Odunze on the outside. It had that big X receiver. Rome Odunze, in my opinion, is a better prospect than Tet McMillan is. But with that being said, I feel like Tet is clearly the best wide receiver in this class, and so at this point, I feel like you'd be reaching on anybody, and so I think Tet McMillan goes there and becomes Drake May's new number one target. here with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Mason Graham, I think, is going to be the pick. He's just going to be such a disruptive interior defender between Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines Allen. And I just feel like you put him in there. He has good run stuffing capabilities. You can go and get more of a run stuffing defensive tackle later in this class. I think like Deion Walker would be another one. And so I feel like Mason Graham is going to be the pick here. And then next up with the Raiders, I was really trying to decide what to do because I feel like they need some offensive line help. I feel like they need to go out and get a running back. They need corner help. That defense got a little decimated on the back end. Robert Spillane is gone. Trayvon Morig is gone. And so they definitely need some help here. But one thing that I think might help them a little bit more is actually more picks. This team, while offensively, I know they went out, they got Geno Smith. I do feel like they're going to be in a little bit of a rebuilding phase. So I actually have a trade here with the Chicago Bears. So the Bears give up pick 10 and 39, and in return they get pick 6 and I believe 73. And that equates a little bit more, I think, in favor of the Raiders, but it's pretty close on the Draft Tech trade value chart. And so I think here going with Ashton Jeanty for the Bears, they have invested so much in that offensive line to protect Caleb Williams. Now I think you get your do-it-all running back here in Jeanty that Ben Johnson is just going to absolutely love. Yeah, you maybe have to give up a little bit more than you want, but now if you look at their picks, so they have a big gap here between 73 and 149. You can trade back again in the third round, accumulate more picks a little bit later in the draft, and you spread out your picks a little bit more, and you also go and get what I would consider a blue chip running back. And this is where I feel like that they're kind of gonna take Ashton Jeanty. So to me, this is the two biggest changes I think I have on my board after the combine. So the Jets right now, I was highly expecting Morgan Moses to come back. You had him there. That offensive line was really performing well. You have Olufashanu on the other side that looked like that was going to be their tackle tandem for the future, and they just didn't re-sign him. And it's not like he went for a hefty price tag. It was I think $8 million a year. And so I do feel like now they are kind of pigeonholed, and they're going to invest in Armand Mimbu. He is my offensive lineman one, especially after the combine. Went back, watched him a little bit. His physicality and his just demeanor is so impressive. His athleticism at 330 pounds, really impressive. The only knock that I could really find on him was that he reaches a little bit too much sometimes. And he doesn't quite trust his athleticism fully just yet. But I think at the NFL level, he'll get those mental reps in practice and in the preseason. And come week 1, you'll have a starting caliber right tackle very easily. And so I feel like just the loss of Morgan Moses kind of pushes them in that direction. And then next up here with the Carolina Panthers. So they made some moves. They were not able to sign Milton Williams, but they did make some other moves on that defensive interior. Still need that impact edge rusher. And so I'm actually going to go with Shamar Stewart. I went back and watched him, and I know what you're going to say. He only had a sack and a half in his last year at college. Actually, I think he's only had 4.5 sacks in the last 3 years. But with that being said, I think you go look at other defensive linemen that have been in other systems, i.e. Nick Scorton. He had a really, really productive year at Purdue, and he went down to play at Kyle Field and at Texas A&M, and his production just like fell off a cliff. And it's just because of the way that they asked these defensive linemen to play. Shamar Stewart was kicked into the interior. He was playing more over the tackle, which just gives edge rushers less opportunities to really pin their ears back and get after the passer. I think if you go watch him again at the Senior Bowl, you watch how athletic he is at the combine in the right coaching situation, he can really be a difference maker. And I feel like his ceiling is so high in the NFL that I think it's worth taking him over maybe some more proven guys like James Pierce Jr. or Mike Green, who might have the production to back up that that pick, but I don't think that they have the same level of ceiling or potential as Shamar Stewart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think with Sheduer, it's he does have a lot of versatility that he can come with. In the team like Carolina, they invested a bunch in the free agency already, even after just day one. So bringing on Patrick Jones, Tershawn Wharton, Bobby Brown, as well, like extending J.C. Horn. And I know we're getting in the secondary here, but I still feel like they could go defensive line. I think Stewart is very versatile guy as well. I would think he probably would be best just with his size in a more traditional defensive end role, and I'm pretty sure Carolina does like kind of more an outside line, like 3-4 outside linebacker role. That being said, though, he did also do that at Texas A&M, but we've seen teams do that as well. For example, like Tampa Bay, they have Vita Vea as their nose tackle, but then they have Kalijah Cansey, who I think actually maybe weighs a little bit less or is about the same size as Shamar Stewart, and he's a down, technically defensive tackle. So I think it could just be that scheme fit, but as I said at the beginning, though, he is very versatile as he has moved around all throughout the defensive line. So
He
I I could see him working well in the Panther system. I could see Amon Membu, especially too, as well. You have Olu Fashanu can come in, be that left tackle as he was last year, and then Armand Membu, who played right tackle at Missouri, he can slot in at that role as that's where I think that opening is there for them. And so all the other picks, I think, especially too after day one of free agency, I think makes sense. I think your Patriots are definitely now in the receiver market when it comes to the
Oh yeah.
draft, and I think Ted McMillan, I think is just, I think it's a good compliment to what you guys already have. And so you guys need that big, tall outside receiver, and you guys even too just signed Matt Collins as well. Totally different type of receiver. He's also big, but he's definitely more that pure X. Well, I think Ted McMillan. It'll be fun for Josh McDaniels to move him around. So far though,
Yeah.
I think this top 8 makes sense.
No, yeah. I these guys I think are going to be pretty set, I think, going into April. From here on out, I mean, we'll have a few more picks, but like I feel like especially as we get later on in the draft, there will be a couple new names where I feel like it really just shows how not different these guys are from like 16 to 32. There's a lot of guys that I feel like could go really anywhere. So,
Yeah,
moving on to the New Orleans Saints. So I think the Saints, they're in an interesting spot. I do think Spencer Rattler is going to be, well, I guess they're keeping Derek Carr. But I feel like they're going to continue to try to develop Spencer Rattler and keep this offense kind of moving forward. It doesn't sound like they're going to trade Chris Olave either, which I know there were some rumors around that. So I think they just continue to build it. And I feel like Tyler Warren is like the perfect complementary piece to everything that they want to do. I also think Kellen Moore going down there, they are going to have a much more creative offensive mind, kind of calling the plays. And I would love to see what he could do with Tyler Warren in that system. And so I feel like Tyler Warren goes here to number 9 with the New Orleans Saints. Here is where the Las Vegas Raiders traded back to. They're going to go and take Will Johnson, the corner from Michigan. Just a really, really solid corner, in my opinion. I know he's fallen a little bit out of good graces with the draft community, but you just go look at 2023 and you realize that he has the ceiling to be a top 5 corner in the NFL. Just a really technically sound guy. People do not usually move the way he does at 6'2", 200 pounds, and so I feel like the Raiders, they have that pass rush already. Go and get a really solid corner in man coverage and in zone as well. And so I feel like that's the pick there for the Raiders. And then Will Campbell falling all the way down here to 11. I just feel like the 49ers will not be able to pass that up. That's just too good a value. I think for them, they need help in the trenches. And maybe he is the outlier here. I think he solidifies that interior, but with Trent Williams getting older, this could potentially, and very unlikely, potentially be your Trent Williams replacement. At the very least, he's the replacement in the locker room and as the leader. But I feel like he brings a personality and a tone setting style of play to that team that I think Kyle Shanahan would really like. So
yeah,
next up,
and real quick on that, Aaron Banks too also left as well.
yeah, yeah.
So I
So
think that he could absolutely replace him right now.
yeah. Oh, for sure. And could potentially do it also at a Pro Bowl level in his rookie season. So here with the Dallas Cowboys, Another big riser for me in the combine or from the combine was Matthew Golden, the wide receiver from Texas. Jerry Jones loves his wide receivers from Texas, but just going back and seeing one that he ran a 4.29, and then also kind of seeing what he was able to do throughout the season, especially as the games got bigger and bigger, he continued to show up. And I just feel like you have him, CD Lamb, you have Jake Ferguson. You can go and get a running back later in this draft. I feel like that's going to be a really, really good skill position room. And then if that offensive line can just be solidified with some like day 2 picks, I feel like that's going to be the best way to go there for the Dallas Cowboys. So Matthew Golden going there to the Cowboys. Here with the Miami Dolphins, does not look like Javon Holland is coming back. He's still a free agent at the moment, hasn't signed with anybody at the recording of this video. But Malachi Starks, I think being on the board is just going to be too good a value for them to go and just immediately replace Javon Holland's production. I feel like Malachi Starks, especially at the combine, showed how good athletically he was. On tape, he shows how smart of a football player that he is as well. And so I feel like Malachi Starks here to the Miami Dolphins just makes a lot of sense again. Indianapolis Colts going with Jahdae Barron, the versatile corner from Texas. I know they actually just signed Trevarius Ward. They have Juju Brents. With that being said, Jahdae Barron was really good at slot corner, free safety, outside corner. He can really kind of play wherever. And so I feel like you go and you get a corner that can just be very versatile on the back end of that defense. They invested in edge rusher last year. This is a really deep edge and defensive line class. I feel like they can go and do that a little bit later. But this defense really needs a lot of work. And I feel like going and getting Jahdae Barron makes sense for the Colts. Your Falcons, unfortunately, had to release Grady Jarrett today. That was a tough move, especially because you know like it probably wouldn't have happened if the Kirk Cousins contract wasn't on the books. But with that being said, going and looking at some of the defensive linemen that are on the board, I think that this would be a good opportunity to potentially go and replace them. Well, I say replace his production, but Mike Green, I think, is going to be the guy that I take just to kind of really help build up that pass rush again. I know it's not a defensive tackle, but with that being said, you guys invested a lot in defensive tackle last year. And so now I think you get the edge rusher to kind of complement that defensive line. And so and also sorry about Grady Jarrett. I know as a
That's
Falcons
fine.
fan, that probably had to hurt. But
That's definitely fine. It's a business. I get it.
yeah. Nah, and then lastly here, before I throw it back over to you, I feel like this one has just kind of become like chalk for me at this point where like I do this pick every single time for the Arizona Cardinals, but Kenneth Grant just makes too much sense. Like they need defensive interior help. He is one of the best, if not the best, run stuffing defensive tackle in this class. And he also still brings some level of pass rush to the table. And I just feel like Jonathan Gannon is just going to love this fit. So Kenneth Grant, I think it just makes so much sense for the Cardinals here.
Yeah. No, it's sorry with that. It definitely just feels like if Kenneth Grant's there, he's not going to go past it. But I will say one thing with Kenneth Grant, looking at kind of how free agency has gone so far, just going to my Falcons, wouldn't be surprised if maybe they go defensive tackle again, like they did a lot of that last year, but maybe go Kenneth Grant and then really try and solidify a young defensive line with Rook, Kenneth Grant, and then maybe Brandon Dorless. They do still have David Onyemata there as well, but we'll kind of have to wait and see. And I will say that same thing I think could be said to the Colts with a couple of moves that they've made so far as well with Cam Bynum and then Trevarius Ward. Nothing
That's fair.
against like Jahdae Barron, but I think like maybe spread the wealth around a little bit, really beef up that defensive line. Maybe see them going both the Colts and the Falcons going linebacker as well with Jahad Campbell. I think that would be extremely interesting. Dolphins, I agree
Mhm.
with Malachi Starks. It just seems like it makes sense. Starks and Warren, for example, are they're both really good players, but just their positional value still haven't really figured out where they're going to go yet. But at the same time, though, too, for a team like the Saints and like the Dolphins, they could go 4 or 5 other different directions at that pick. So we'll have to kind of see how the board shakes out. But that being said, though, I like Starks' pick. Golden to the Cowboys makes sense. Similar, though, I think to some of the other teams, they can go in so many different directions.
Yeah.
Niners, I think if Will Campbell's there, I think they're running to the line. And Raiders, I think trade back and get good value also on top of that. So so far, some changes, but at the same time, though, too, still similar cast of characters as well. I just think some of the positional uh, approaches, I think, changed for some of the teams. So interesting to see how the second half pans out.
Yeah. I mean, one thing too, just about like positional value in this class, I don't necessarily feel like it's like running back has probably one of the lowest positional values of any position. And like Ashton Jeanty in this one went 6 overall. He's gonna go mid first round, probably at the latest. And so I feel like, especially in a weaker class, positional value I think matters a little bit less. And so I feel like it's gonna be an interesting draft to just kind of see, like, do teams really about like value certain positions over others? Is this class weak enough where it doesn't matter? I am kind of interested in that topic as a whole. So here with the Cincinnati Bengals, gonna go with James Pierce Jr. They Sam Hubbard's going to retire, or Sam Hubbard retired. Trey Hendrickson does not look like he's coming back as the edge rusher there, and so I feel like James Pierce Jr. You come in, you get an immediate starter on the edge, and hopefully continue or start to try to replace some of that production lost by Trey Hendrickson. So going to get him there. The Seattle Seahawks. So this would have been a popular Shadur Sanders spot until about 7 hours ago when they signed Sam Darnold to a 3-year deal. So we're going to go in a different route here. We're actually going to go on the offensive interior, and we're going to get Gray Zabel. Actually, I guess he's an offensive tackle. We're going to get Gray Zabel. He was just so good at the Senior Bowl. He played both guard spots and center. He can really kind of fill in wherever needed. And I feel like with Sam Darnold, you're going to want to have a much more solid interior offensive line to allow him to step up in the pocket and really kind of do his thing. Whereas like it felt like, especially at the Jets, like they just got him absolutely killed, and that's why he ended up having to move on. So go and get Gray Zabel, start to really build that offensive line around Sam Darnold. You got rid of DK Metcalf as well. And so I feel like that offensive line in that running game is going to be very, very, very important for them going forward. So take Gray Zabel here off the board. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is where I have Jahad Campbell coming off the board. He's a really good linebacker. I also think too in that system he could come down and play a lot closer to the edge, and so or play as an edge rusher in pass rushing situations. And so I feel like that's going to be a really good fit there for Todd Bowles. Here with the Denver Broncos. This is where I have Colston Loveland coming off the board. I was going back and forth between him and Emeka Egbuka, and I think I did Emeka Egbuka in my last mock. And so I wanted to give Colston Loveland some love and just kind of he was the number one target in one of the worst offenses in college football and had a phenomenal season. And I say number one, he was really the only target and still was pretty dominant as a receiving tight end. And so I feel like you get him and Sean Payton together with Bo Nix throwing him the ball. He can be that reliable over the middle target for Bo Nix. And I feel like he has a phenomenal NFL career from there. I don't know if he'll ever be like a Travis Kelce or like that good, but I feel like he's just going to be a really solid NFL starter for a long time. So Colston Loveland going there to the Broncos. Pittsburgh Steelers. So one guy has fallen, and I know people are going to be like, there's no way he makes it this far. But a lot of the rumors coming out of the combine is that Sheduer Sanders is going to go a lot lower than people think. I have been fairly low on Sheduer Sanders throughout this process. But with that being said, some of the like news and rumors and moves that have come out recently, I do feel like Sheduer Sanders is going to go more in that Kenny Pickett range, where he's probably going to go around 20. I guess it's ironic that I have him going to the Steelers, but the Steelers I think are going to be in the short term quarterback market. Sheduer Sanders I think has some developmental things that you want to work out before you put him in an NFL game, and so I feel like here taking Sheduer for the like for a pick for the future, I feel like makes a lot of sense for the Steelers. So I like the fit there. Moving on to the Los Angeles Chargers. This is where I have Emeka Egbuka coming off the board. I do think that they just need much, much, much more consistent weapons. And I think that's exactly what a Emeka Egbuka is. He is more explosive, I think, than like a Jackson Smith and Jigba. But with that being said, I don't know. He's always been like a number two in his college career. And I feel like putting him in this LA offense, he can kind of replace Josh Palmer a little bit. And you have Lad McConkey there, like to kind of be the number one and the coverage dictator. And then Emeka Egbuka can come in there and be that possession receiver for the Chargers. Green Bay Packers going with edge rusher Michael Williams. So another really, really toolsy edge rusher here. Didn't have the most production at Georgia, had a little bit more, I think, than like Shamar Stewart. But with that being said, had some more injury issues. And I feel like that's why he falls all the way down here. But they need some edge help. They definitely also need corner, but I didn't have anybody at this point that I felt super comfortable taking. And so I think Michael Williams going here to the Green Bay Packers makes a good bit of sense. And then last, before I throw it over to you, before I finish out the draft, I'm going to have the Vikings trade here. This is just a really common trade back spot. They only have 4 picks. And so I feel like making a move back, I think makes a lot of sense for this organization. And then I'm actually going to go. I've done this trade a couple times now, but the Patriots, they have so much draft capital. They just went out and spent a buttload of money in free agency. They don't need to be making like 11 draft picks. And so I think they give pick 38, 77 for pick 24. That favors Minnesota slightly, I believe, on the draft tech trade chart. But I just feel like that makes sense. And then the Patriots go and they help out Drake May one more time in the first round and snag Calvin Banks, the offensive tackle from Texas. So yeah, that's the 24th pick. It's, what are your thoughts so far?
Well, I like that your Patriots trade up here, and it's a good point too. They've already made so many moves to guys who are going to be starter, like significant minutes, not guys that they could
Yeah.
potentially cut, and it's just $1 million or something like that. So going and utilizing those draft picks that they've acquired from previous trades in the past and go and get Kelvin Banks, or if you don't like that, go get Josh Simmons or an Ariante Ursary, whoever that you would like to go and see. But I like this route though too, is the defensive players that they've brought and they've added, and even as of this recording, which is just Monday night, and as you mentioned, they still maybe could go get Cam Robinson, but they've already gotten Matt Collins, Austin Hooper, Morgan Moses, Harold Landry, Milton Williams, Kyrus Tunga, Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis. All those guys are like quality minutes guys. Like if they're not first
Yeah.
stringers, they're coming in as subs. So you're right. Use those picks to be aggressive. Make sure this offensive line is getting younger and with athletic guys with a lot of potential. So I like that a lot. Michael Williams to the Packers makes sense. Green Bay, everybody talks about their secondary. They have addressed it a little bit so far in free agency, getting Nate Hobbs, but I do think that they also need to go and get some edge rushers as well, just defensive line help, just in general. So make Buka to the Chargers makes sense. Sheduer is one I've been thinking about. It's like if he doesn't go 6 to the Raiders, which now I can see why the Raiders wouldn't want to take him, just because they just traded for Geno Smith. Then Seahawks now as well in question. If he doesn't make it to the Steelers, or the Steelers don't take him, it would have to be a team trading up into the first round to go and get him at a very discounted rate than I think what a lot of people were initially thinking of him. And who knows? Maybe it's still possible he goes 1-2 to
Yeah.
Tennessee and then to Cleveland. But he's the one that I think is people are going to fall on, and because his ceiling is not as high as Cam Ward, so that makes sense as well. Everybody else above, too, I agree with the moves that they're making. They're quality guys: Colson Loveland, Jahad Campbell, Gray Zabel, James Pierce. I think guys with a lot of with some high ceiling and can provide a lot of quality minutes in their rookie year.
Yeah. No, and that's like Sheduer is a really interesting conversation just because he is like Sheduer might be, I don't want to say ready to play in the NFL, because I think that there's definitely some things that he needs to work out in his game. Like I feel like he really has to load up to drive the ball. Like I think he can hold on to the ball way too long. He can kind of drift out of the back of the pocket at times, but like I think he makes good reads. He can throw it with pretty good timing. It's just he has some really, really bad plays that I think you need to work out of his game. I also question his athleticism a little bit. And so maybe the Raiders went and got Geno to mentor Sheduer Sanders because they know he's a bit of a project and they know that Geno might be getting close to the end of his career. So they went out, they got Geno. They're going to draft Sheduer at 6, or maybe make a move to draft him. I mean, I think it's really going to be interesting on draft night to see where he actually falls. So
I could see if it's interesting with it being Seattle. I could see in this scenario where the Raiders trade back and then at 10, then they acquire more draft picks
yeah,
to then take Shador, because also Gino has to know too, just father time eventually is it's like they're going to try and start to think for the future. Uh, but like a team that has acquired more draft picks could maybe take a shot at Shador. The interesting though with the Saints, sorry, not the Saints, the Seahawks, is because Sam Darnold is still only 28, 29. He has potentially another decade left in the league. Now Geno Smith, he's 34, 35, if I'm not
yeah,
mistaken.
I
So like
think he's
his
35.
time is just coming up. So I could see a team like the Raiders doing that, where it'd be like, let's take a shot on Shador. We have other draft picks as well that we have acquired. Now that being said, that they use one on Geno Smith. But if they would trade back in this scenario, I could see them maybe taking him at 10 if he falls to them. But it does seem more like just more and more as things happen that Shador is kind of if he's there, the team will think about it, but people aren't going to go actively seek up to go and get him as of right now.
Yeah. And I think you look at the moves too. So like I think the Giants are a big question at 3. They still have unanswered questions at quarterback, but the Browns traded for Kenny Pickett. Not that if you feel like Shadur is going to be a starting caliber quarterback, that Kenny Pickett is going to keep you from drafting him. The Jets went after Justin Fields. The Saints have not traded Derek Carr, and they've said that they're going to keep him on the roster and he will be their quarterback in 2025. So there's just like a lot of these teams are not making the moves where like I felt like the Patriots and the Commanders last year, they're like, we know we're getting our guy at picks 2 and 3. And it's like we are going to try to like go through free agency and build around whoever we're able to select at the end of April. And I
Yeah,
just don't get that vibe from a lot of the teams up at the top. That like Tennessee, I think they made it clear that Cam Ward's probably the pick. I think with some of their moves today. But I feel like otherwise teams have started to prepare for life with a bridge quarterback.
real
Um,
quick, just and I'm totally spitballing here. This is just something that's coming up to mind. But when I look at the Colts offense when they were successful, was with Gardner Minshew, and he's definitely a facilitator as well. And Shador Sanders is nowhere near has the arm talent as an Anthony Richardson, but he also I think could be healthier and is a hell of a lot
yeah,
more accurate than Anthony Richardson.
yeah.
It is I'm just spitballing here because I think one of the things maybe they could do is you take him, and then if Anthony Richardson pans out, then you could trade Shador Sanders and get some more draft picks like as this potential guy. But that as I'm saying it out loud, it's like they would trade him, so they would spend a first on him, but they'd trade him and probably get like a third back in return. And part of me just going through this thought experiment is like just other potential teams that would maybe take a flyer on Shador Sanders in the first round if he's there. But it's like the Colts maybe as I'm talking about, but even then too, it seems extremely unlikely. There's so many other needs that the Colts could address.
It, if the Colts trade Anthony Richardson now, I could see it, but I don't think like come draft night, if you draft Shadur at 14 and then try to trade Anthony Richardson, teams are going to be like, well, I'm not trading anything significant for your scraps. Like that's,
Yeah.
uh,
Oh no, I'm talking about like you would keep Anthony Richardson on the roster, but it'd be
yeah,
like
I don't love that specifically. I
yeah,
think you if you have because right now there's still hope that Anthony Richardson develops as like for the Colts, and I
well,
don't think
yeah,
that you keep that hope alive if you draft Shadur.
yeah.
And
Oh
so
no,
like
I agree. I'm spitballing of like other potential
yeah,
very loose explanations for why teams would want to draft Shador because there's definitely
yeah.
limited opportunities now. So
No,
it's
and I agree.
interesting.
Yeah. I do think another potential one, I've heard and read a couple rumors that like San Francisco is not really interested in extending Brock Purdy, so you could go and draft Shadur there at 11. That might be an interesting situation in a Shanahan system, but I don't know. I think that's really an intriguing option
Yeah.
for like just for them. But Sheduer as a whole is going to be, I think, the biggest question mark going into draft night on April 24th. So uh let's get back to the mock draft here. So the Houston Texans, they just traded away Laramie Tunsil, which is an insane move, especially considering some of the offensive line woes that they were having in 2025. So they have to go out and sign somebody. So Josh Connerly Jr. is going to be the one that comes to mind. I really, really thought about Josh Simmons, but I just feel like Josh Simmons would definitely be the pick if it wasn't for the injury concerns. They now need a guy to come in and be their starting left tackle right now. And I feel like Josh Connerly is probably the best guy to do that. Whereas Josh Simmons he's not going to be able to play until August. Like he's going to have some like ramp up time where he's going to have to get in shape and build back up a lot of his strength. And I just don't feel like right now with the moves that the Texans have made, like that is going to be a thing like that like they're going to be able to do that. And so I feel like Josh Connerly can kind of be a plug and play left tackle. He's not going to be near the level that Laramie Tunsil is, but I think he can be a starting caliber tackle right now. Versus, I think Josh Simmons is a much more longer term play for a team that doesn't necessarily have an option at left tackle, or that team
Mhm.
for a team that has an option at left tackle that might be aging or is like nearing the end of a contract. Um, so I that's why I went with Josh Connerly. Moving on to the Rams here at 26. So another guy that I really started to like as of late is Demetrius Knight Jr. He's going to be a really, really athletic linebacker at the second level of that defense. You solidified your offensive line or your defensive line last season. I think you get a new green dot for that defense in Demetrius Knight. They have Cameron Kitchens, Cameron Curl. They still need to address the secondary, but I'm just not totally in love with anybody at this spot, and I like Demetrius Knight maybe a little bit more. I do think there are still corners in free agency that they could go out and sign. I do still think maybe at round 2 you're looking at like a Darian Porter, or maybe you can wait till round 3 and get like a Noel Williams or a Kobe Bryant or a Mello Dotson. Like there are other guys maybe a little bit later that I think that they can get, but Demetrius Knight I really like there. Um, the Ravens. So the Ravens are an interesting one. I actually ended up going with Donovan Ezaraku. I really like what he brings to the edge, like as an edge rusher. He has so much like explosion and burst. He might not be like the high end like long speed athlete that you would want for somebody of his size, but his ability to hold up in the run game is really impressive for his size. I think he can be like a true 3 down edge rusher, outside linebacker for you. And I think just in that system, I just really like what he would bring to the table. So Boston College edge rusher going to the Ravens. Here with the Lions, I really like this pick as well. I think Nick Scorton, he's only 20 years old. He definitely still has some room to develop, but I think you get him in that Dan Campbell defense. You put him across from Aiden Hutchinson. He's going to get a lot of favorable matchups. He's going to be able to pin his ears back and get after the quarterback a lot more than he was at Texas A&M. And I think we're going to see that production kind of skyrocket as he gets in the NFL and gets a year or two under his belt. I think he's going to be a really, really, really good edge rusher for the Lions for a while. So I like that fit. Washington Commanders. This is going to be my last trade of the draft. So I'm gonna have them go trade back here. One team that I made a move with already is the Las Vegas Raiders. They have a ton of draft capital coming up, and so I feel like they can definitely have the flexibility to move up. So the Raiders are going to get pick 29 for pick 37 and 107, and then from there, a new name for me. I believe I had him in one of my mock drafts a little bit ago, but a guy that performed really well at the combine. You go watch his tape, and maybe he's not what you want exactly athletically, but I think the ceiling and the upside is there to be worth this pick. But wide receiver Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, 6'4", 215, ran a 4.47. He is much more of a technician on tape. He has that in and out versatility. honestly, one of my biggest things as like a Patriots fan for them drafting Ted McMillan at 4 is like, well, you could just make a move up at the end of the first round. You could take your tackle at 4 and then make a move up and get Jaden Higgins. And like, there is not a significant drop off in my eyes between Ted McMillan and Jaden Higgins.
Mhm.
Like Ted McMillan is definitely the smoother athlete of the two. Jaden Higgins at times can be a little bit choppy, but Jaden Higgins is a really, really good wide receiver. He's that outside X receiver that I think the Raiders need to really unlock Jacoby Myers. And so I feel like you get Jaden Higgins, add some really good wide receiver play to that room with Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker, Brock Bowers, and I feel like that offense can be really, really good there with Geno Smith. So I like that pick. That was my final trade of the draft. Buffalo Bills, they need some defensive interior help, and Derek Harmon is a phenomenal player. I just what he brings to the table. He lost a little bit of weight this last season, but he had the most pressures of any defensive tackle in college football, and I just think he still has a lot of that run stopping capabilities. But him and Ed Oliver would be a fantastic duo up front here with the Chiefs. They did sign Jalen Moore, the tackle there, to I believe like a 2-year, $30 million deal. But I think investing in Josh Simmons, they have a tackle there. This is kind of what I was talking about with the Texans a few picks ago. But they have a tackle there that can come in and give them decent play. They also have Kingsley Suamataia there. Wanya Morris is there as well. And so I think putting Josh Simmons in a room where he can come in and compete, and when he's ready to take that starting job, I think he can definitely go and do that. But he's not going to be thrust right into a situation where he has to rush back from injury and then potentially re-injure himself. The other thing with Josh Simmons with the Chiefs, he was a right tackle at, I believe it was at Sacramento State before he transferred over to Ohio State, but he was a right tackle there and was a really highly ranked right tackle, and then made the switch over to left tackle. So he has some left tackle, right tackle versatility that I think would be intriguing for the Chiefs. If, let's say, like Kingsley Suamataia develops tremendously at left tackle, you can then still be comfortable transitioning Josh Simmons over to right tackle for the future. So to wrap up the mock draft here, the Eagles lost a lot, I will say, on the defensive side of the ball in free agency. They released Darius Slay, they lost Josh Sweat, they lost Milton Williams, and so I say that the Eagles are still probably the favorites to go and win the Super Bowl again in 2025, but there are some things that they need to replace. I've done Braden Swinson a couple times. I feel like that was semi well received, I guess. After PFF moved him up about 130 spots on their big board, but I'm going to go a different route just for the sake of adding a new name here, because this is a guy that I really like. He had some injury issues this past season, but Maxwell Hairston, the corner from Kentucky, absolutely annihilated the combine. He ran a 4.28, was the fastest guy there. You go watch him at Kentucky, you can really see the 4.28 speed on tape. He's just a really, really solid corner. And I think going forward, if he's your nickel corner there between Quinion Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, or if like Cooper DeJean kind of is your nickel, and then Maxwell Hairston maybe takes more of like a true outside corner role where he's maybe playing a few more snaps, and DeJean is moved around a little bit more. I really like what he could bring to the table in terms of just matching up athletically with just super explosive wide receivers. So I like that pick there for the Philadelphia Eagles. That is my 9th mock draft. Free agency is still going on. There were a lot of moves today, and hopefully there will be a lot more moves going forward. But with the information that we have, that is what I think will happen.
Yeah, no, and it's as some more key signings get completed, we'll start to get a clearer picture. But really, there were a lot of moves that were made today that I think cleared things up a lot for a lot of teams, such as your Patriots, Seattle, Las Vegas, for example. And so maybe some of the other teams that are QB needy teams, like the Steelers, like the Giants, like the Browns. Even though, as you mentioned, the Browns technically did trade for Kenny Pickett, but that's definitely more of just a safety net, as I think maybe he'll bring in some competition. But he's also just an upgrade when it comes to backup quarterback wise compared to Dorian Thompson Robinson. But in general, though, I think there's not too many other teams I think that are depending on what moves they end up making, will really change up their draft process compared to what we've seen already today. As of this recording, as of just a second ago, Najee Harris just signed with the Chargers. But that being said, though, I don't think that will hinder the Chargers from getting a running back in the first 2 or 3 rounds. That's going to help contribute a lot of minutes of just a 1 year deal. It looks like for $9.5 million, and that's what I'm going to be seeing from here. It is going to be like, I bet teams sign guys to shorter term deals, but I don't think that will hinder them if they really like a guy long term on drafting him. And so, especially too, as you get to like the later portions of the round, late round one picks as well, even those guys, a lot of them have round two grades. They just happen to be going in the first round. So
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see what a lot of the teams end up doing when free agency is essentially all said and done. But I think that it's going to be fascinating on how the draft plays out. And we've talked about this a bunch, but I think one of the reasons why there were so many moves today is teams who, I think a lot of teams aren't super high on this first round class as a whole. I think as a draft as a whole, I think that there's going to be a lot of good that come out of it, but we might see that more round two, round three. But I think a lot of teams don't want to, if they're, I don't think they want to trade up to go and get a guy in the first round, because they love him. There's not too many of those guys that are out there. So I
Yeah.
think teams are trying to get their first round their day one starters now, or teams like Seattle who are like, hey, I don't think we're going to be competitive this year, and we're going to need to pay some of these guys eventually that we don't really want to pay. So let's ship them now and get a lot more picks, i.e. Geno Smith, i.e. DK Metcalf, and get a lot
Yeah.
more quality picks there. So, it's going to be interesting to see like Seattle strategy, your Patriots strategy, the Bears strategy, Colts as well. Like a lot of the other teams and how they go about the draft. I think this was very interesting. We're going to only keep learning more from here.
Yeah. No, I mean, this draft class is very is it's different. Like I was talking with our dad about it this past weekend, and it's like there are like 20, like 25 defensive linemen that I feel like can come in and really contribute to franchises in their rookie season. But like there's just not like I don't know, like I don't feel like there's a Marvin Harrison Jr. or like any of these
Because it's
quarterback
not, yeah.
prospects. Well, like, but like these defensive linemen are really, really good players. It's just not the sexy draft that last year was. And even like I think you go look at what was it, 2022, what everybody compares this draft class to. Like, yeah, the quarterbacks are the same, but like there's still a lot of defensive talent. I think, especially like defensive line, offensive line talent, and interior specifically. But like there's still a lot of talent to be had. It's just not like the sexy picks that I think a lot of people want to make. And I really could see like 20 trenches players taken, 20 offensive linemen,
Oh
20
yeah,
defensive linemen in the first round. So
yeah,
uh,
I can
I'm
see that.
I'm I'm
Just even for
excited.
example, Luther Burden didn't make in your first round mock.
Yeah,
I think
he's
some people might be shocked by that, but at the same time, though, too, it's a possibility. Like
I mean,
it
I just don't see a huge difference. This is the problem I have. Is like I made the comment, I don't see a big difference between Jaden Higgins and Ted McMillan. There's not a big difference, in my opinion, between Jalen Royals and Luther Burden. Like, and it's just like I don't know. Like there is, but I think like you talked about skill sets. It's like I don't know if I want to pay a premium for this skill set when I can go and get it at a discount rate in 2 rounds.
no,
And so I think it's just a really interesting conversation to be had about a lot of the prospects in this class. So
yeah.
let's let's go ahead. Let's wrap up this mock draft here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. That is the best way to help out the channel. While you're down there, leave a comment on what you thought of this mock draft. Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you have done differently? And on that, we'll see you guys next time.